We have made it to the first week of the regular season, and if you're already looking to replace a third of your roster, well, don't worry. We've got 20 plus names here for you on the Saturday waiver edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax. Welcome, everybody, to the Saturday Waiver Wire edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax. It's the first waivers episode of the year. Erik Halterman here, joined by Ryan Boyer. Ryan, we sort of had a waivers episode last week. We tried to do a combination late draft season sleepers and early FAAB pickups, etc. But this is the full-blown FAAB. A little bit of a confusing weekend. Some people, this will be their first weekend to pick up players. For some, all the good guys already got picked up last week, but we're going to try to do our best to cover for everyone. Are you looking to pick up 3 to 5 players everywhere, or did you nail all your drafts and you don't even need to make a single pickup this entire season?
Unfortunately, yes. I'm going to have to pick up a good number of guys. Thankfully, at least I do not have any Nestor Cortez shares. A very rude welcoming back to Yankee Stadium for poor Nestor today.
Yeah, how badly did that end up getting? I saw that he was getting knocked around early on.
First 3 pitches of the game, 3 home runs.
Oh, wow.
First time since 2000 that has happened.
Yeah, I would say that's not great. Those home runs went to, was it Paul Goldschmidt, Cody Bellinger, and Aaron Judge to start the game? Yeah, what a way to start your Brewers career for Nestor Cortez. So I guess, don't be picking him up anywhere if he's out there. Plenty of time for Nestor Cortez to pull out of this poor outing and end up being a perfectly fine acquisition for the Brewers, though should note he's a very high fly ball percentage guy, so home run problems, that is always the knock on him, and you're seeing it right away. We are going to get to the names for the bulk of today's show, but as always, we want to start with some of the headlines. We've got a handful of injuries to take care of first, beginning with Josh Lowe, who unfortunately has not made it very far into the season before picking up his first injury of the year. He made it 1 game into the season, not even 1 game. He is now out with an oblique strain, which is been revealed to be a grade 2 strain, according to an MRI just today, and saying it's worse than one which kept him out last year for an extended period. So this is not good. We're almost even entering potential drop territory with Josh Lowe, or would you be trying to keep him as much as you can? I think he was going in the 1-teens in the NFBC main event.
Yeah, 2 different IL stints for an oblique injury on the same side last year. Can you have like a chronic oblique issue on the same side? I don't know, but
looks like it.
Yeah, it's not good news for Josh Lowe. And as our avid listeners know, I'm very much in on Josh Lowe and lots of the Rays bats this year. And unfortunately, not only is he going to miss, any extended absence is not ideal, but he's also going to miss out on the Rays' very home heavy schedule early on. So he's not going to get to benefit from that Yankee Stadium dimensions and that Florida weather early on in the season. And is he a drop? I think he probably has to be in NFBC drafts. Maybe not right away if you've been fortunate enough to avoid too many injuries, but it's hard to imagine that you're going to be that lucky over the next several weeks to be able to hang on to him for. I think we're probably looking at like an 8-week absence. I'm guessing. Really unfortunate for Josh Lowe. Maybe if you cut him loose now, you can be proactive down the line and pick him back up before anybody else is ready to do that. But yeah, I think in your deeper leagues, especially if you don't have the IL space, he's probably got to be a drop.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but a tough call to make. You might just give yourself more options down the rest of the way if you just cut bait now. I don't know. Be a tough call. I did not end up drafting him anywhere, so it's not a call I'm going to have to make, but maybe you could report back next weekend with whether or not you've cut him.
One thought I had on, and if you're very much speculating. I mean, Cameron Misner, I guess, is going to be filling in for now. He had a walk-off home run yesterday. I mean, he was a prospect of some note several years ago. I'm not really interested in him. Could it open the door for Chandler Simpson? He's had a great spring. Didn't really look like he had a real chance to break camp with the club, but I mean, he's got as much stolen base upside as virtually anyone once he does arrive in the majors. So maybe in your redrafts, if you have the space, you could make a deep speculative add on Chandler Simpson in the hopes that the Rays give him a look.
Yeah, Chandler Simpson got a bunch of buzz this spring, a remarkable profile. He stole 94 bases in the minors in 2023, 104 last year, where he also hit his first career homer. I don't know for a fact whether or not that was an inside the Parker, but I think it probably was. Single-digit strikeout rates at pretty much every stop as well. To somebody who could hit well above 300, steal as many bases as he's allowed to, and not give you any homers. It's a profile that seems like it belongs in the year 1925, not 2025. I'd be really excited to see him if he does come up. I don't think it's significant that he was not the guy who got the call up here. It was instead Jake Mangum, a 29-year-old outfielder who I believe is just a guy, going to be up for a bit, filling some space. I think that the Rays were probably going to keep Simpson down to get an extra year of team control, even with this injury, and so that we shouldn't necessarily be discouraged by the fact that he didn't get the immediate call. I think he still is an interesting flyer to place a bid on in leagues where you can do that.
Yeah, certainly a situation to keep an eye on, see if we hear any buzz about him potentially getting a look. Eloy Jimenez is also at AAA Durham.
Yeah.
You could maybe do a deep league spec if you are counting on a little bit of a bounce back there. They did play him in the outfield some this spring. So, yeah, that's a
slightly different profile, a little less likely to get you 50-plus steals. Yeah. So keep an eye on there. Should mention this weekend at the NFBC, if you play any leagues over there, normally you can't pick up minor leaguers who have not yet been called up unless they were drafted and then dropped. But this weekend particularly, you are allowed to stash guys. I think that's because there were some drafts since the last FAAB period where you could have drafted anybody. So it's only fair to make those guys available. I'm not sure the exact reasoning, but know that they are available. So if Chandler Simpson is somebody you want to stash, this is the week where you can do it. You probably can't do it next week in most leagues. Talking about some of the other injury news, we had a couple guys getting injured while hitting home runs. I guess if you're going to go out, that's the way to go. But Gleyber Torres injured himself, his ribs. He was grabbing his left side after hitting a home run yesterday. Actually stuck in the game for a couple more innings, and he has not been placed on the IL. So maybe, are we saying Gleyber Torres is probably fine until he hits his next homer?
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, it seems like he's going to be okay. Apparently, it was something he dealt with late in spring training, and it's kind of flared up. But no lineup yet for the Dodgers, or the Dodgers. They're playing the Dodgers. The Tigers are playing the Dodgers. No lineup yet for the Tigers tonight, so we don't know if Gleyber is in there yet. But it seems like more of a day-to-day situation, and gosh, the Tigers could probably use his bat. That lineup right now is looking pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah. If he doesn't come back, I guess there's a bunch of options that they could shift around a little bit. Maybe you move Colt Keith back to second. Maybe Spencer Torkelson, who we'll talk about soon, moves back from DH to first base. There's some options there. None of them particularly exciting. Probably could say the same thing in Pittsburgh, where Nick Gonzalez started the injury on a home run trend. On opening day, he broke his ankle while hitting a homer. I've never seen that in my life. Congrats, Nick, for the achievement, but he's going to be out for some time. It's not Nick York who got the call. Even if it was, I'm not sure how excited we'd be, but he'd be at least a name to know. It was instead Edmanuel Valdez, with Adam Frazier set to get some starts, and neither of us put Adam Frazier on the deep league target list. Are you going to change that now? Are you regretting not putting Adam Frazier on there, or should we leave him alone?
Not regretting it, no. Yeah, you mentioned Nick York. He's the guy who would be somewhat interesting if he does get a look, and that's certainly a possibility. I mean, fractured ankle, I suspect it's going to be a pretty lengthy absence for Nick Gonzalez. I mean, I would even rather see Emmanuel Valdez get more reps than Adam Frazier. I think I'm not going to say interesting, but more interesting than Adam Frazier. But not terribly interested in either of those guys that are currently in line for second base reps. But yeah, Nick York is a guy to keep in mind if he does get a promotion eventually.
All right, let's move on to some closers. I always want to track all the saves in the early going just to try to figure out who we should be picking up this weekend. Now, of course, we are recording this Saturday afternoon, so we have seen the first 2 days worth of games. By the time the Sunday FAAB period goes, you'll have 2 more games under your belt. For some teams, they've only played 1, so you might have 3 times as much information on who's pitching in the 9th inning. But based on what we've seen so far, how about David Bednar? Gave up runs in a non-save situation, was it, on opening day, and then got a save opportunity in the second game of the year and gave up 2 more runs, but escaped with a save. Pretty darn worried about David Bednar if you've drafted him anywhere. I think a couple of the other Pirates relievers just missed the cut for our deep league pitcher ads, but I'm pretty sure if you have room and you don't get any of the better options, taking a shot at Dennis Santana or Colin Halterman might make sense this week before Bednar actually loses the job.
Yeah, not a super encouraging first start. I should mention that in that first game, O'Neal Cruz misplayed a ball in center field that was ruled a triple, but should have been caught. So not totally David Bednar's fault, but couple relatively shaky appearances to start off after he had not a great spring and, of course, not a great 2024. So trending in a bad direction for David Bednar. And I'm with you that being proactive with Dennis Santana or Colin Holderman is probably a smart move.
Do you have any lean there? I think it was Santana who was maybe going to come on after Bednar, but I think that's because Holderman had already entered the game in the 8th, which could mean that he's the next guy up.
Yeah, it's really a coin flip, I think. I mean, Santana last year looked like a better option. I think maybe I'd lean Holderman right now, but I don't have a strong lean one way or the other right there.
All right, another closer situation to track here in Texas. Luke Jackson, he got a save in the second game. That was after blowing it in a tie game on opening day. He gave up a 3-run homer. And this was after Luke Jackson was somewhat surprisingly named the primary closer, or the guy who would probably close, or maybe even wasn't even named. It was a weird situation where after a game in which Luke Jackson pitched the 9th, then Bruce Bochy said, that's pretty much how we're going to go, or something to that effect. So it wasn't entirely clear. And if the Rangers wanted to move away from Jackson, whose profile in recent seasons doesn't exactly scream lockdown closer, if they wanted to move away from him, they could have after that poor first outing. So the fact that they didn't, they went right back to him for a save opportunity the next day. I mean, he's the closer, right?
Certainly, it looks that way now. Yeah, I'm with you. Luke Jackson had a really good spring. I think he was unscored upon this spring. Maybe that's what kind of tilted Bruce Bochy in that direction. He's always been able to miss bats at a pretty high level, but not good control, and has never really consistently had a great ERA either. So I would not put much faith in him keeping the job long. He certainly looks at the top of the pecking order now. I would still rather have Chris Martin or Robert Garcia rest of season. It sure seems like a situation that's ripe with an outside addition eventually. Of course, I've thought that for several months now. I don't know why they haven't signed David Robertson yet, but still could do that potentially. Yeah, Luke Jackson is certainly worth rostering now. I picked him up in one of my leagues midweek this week. But, saves are saves, and it does look like he's at the top of the pecking order, but I don't have much trust that he's going to keep that job long.
Yeah, he will not be in our priority ad section today, although I do think you should add Luke Jackson if you're desperate for saves. Just don't think about Kirby Yates last year, who took the job and went on to be one of the best closers in baseball last year. He is a better pitcher than Luke Jackson. I don't see Luke Jackson doing the same thing. One more closer situation, Tanner Scott and the Dodgers. The Dodgers have 4 wins through 4 games, and they've had 4 save opportunities. The first one in the Tokyo series went to Scott, and he got the job done. I think nobody was surprised when Scott didn't get the save the very next day. He was never to pitch back-to-back days in mid-March. That one went to Alex Vesia. But then on a domestic opening day, it wasn't Scott, but instead Blake Trinan. And then Scott pitched last night and blew a save. So if you're a Tanner Scott drafter, which I am in a few too many places, how worried should you be? Is he still the guy?
Yeah, I'm heavily invested in Tanner Scott as well. I think it's fair to kind of revert back to where we were initially with the Dodgers bullpen situation, or at least my perception that Scott was going to be at the top of kind of a quasi closer by committee. That might be a stretch. I think he's still clearly at the top of the heap. But obviously Dave Roberts is not going to be saving him for the 9th when he feels there's a better opportunity to pitch Tanner Scott earlier in games. I do still think that Tanner Scott's going to be extremely valuable in fantasy. With the Dodgers going to win 140 games, he could still get 30 plus saves easily, even if he's not used as the closer, for 75% of those save chances, and he's going to put up good ratios too. So I still think he's going to be very valuable, but yeah, kind of reverting back to my first initial reaction with the Dodgers bullpen situation, that he's more the head of a group of guys than a standalone guy by himself.
Yeah, Scott might actually be more similar to, say, Jose Alvarado than we typically talk about him. And Jose Alvarado, when he's at his best, he leads the Phillies committee. And then when he's not at his best, he doesn't get saves. Tanner Scott, like Alvarado, great stuff, but pretty inconsistent in how good that command is. If you get a bad year of Scott or Alvarado, you move him down to the 7th or 6th inning. We're definitely not there yet with Scott, but this doesn't look quite like Twins, Joan Duran situation where it basically is him, just not quite always. This does look closer to a true committee. One more bit of news before we get to the ads. No real FAAB implications for this one, but Spencer Strider is set to begin his rehab assignment today with AAA Gwinnett. I did not draft him anywhere, and given how smoothly things have gone this spring and how quickly he's starting his rehab assignment, I am increasingly getting more and more FOMO here. Did I miss out on somebody who's going to be a Cy Young level performer for 4.5 months? I mean, how stupid am I going to look?
I don't know. I mean, he looked awfully good in spring training. I know his overall numbers in those 2 starts, at least the ERA wise, weren't great, but he had a 10-1 strikeout to walk rate in 4 innings, something like that. Looking like probably, I know Mark Bowman, one of the beat writers for the Braves at MLB.com, speculated it would be at least 3 rehab starts. His last simulated game or whatever it was, he threw 45 pitches. So maybe expect 60-ish pitches today. Keep bumping that up, roughly 15 pitches each time. We're looking at, like, I think best case scenario, April 13th or something like that for his season debut. That would be a pretty favorable based on what we were thinking early on with Spencer Strider. Anybody
Would that be
drafting
less than a year after he got hurt?
What's that?
Would that be less than a year after he got hurt, right?
Oh,
he got
God,
hurt after about 3 starts. I'll go check the date, but it was right around then. So
yeah,
we had a note on April 13th of last year that he was ruled out for the season. His final start, it looks like it was April 5th, maybe. So it would end up being a year and a week, which would be pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it was the internal brace procedure and not the full Tommy John, but still, that would be a great best case scenario for sure if you get him back by mid-April.
Yeah, for sure. We are going to move on to our priority ads right after these messages from our sponsor, starting with Fantrax, which is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/rotowire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. And we're also brought to you by the NFBC RotoWire Online Championship, which is live. Play fantasy baseball against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFBC this baseball season. Jeff Erickson, James Anderson, Clay Link, and Erik Halterman, and Ryan Boyer, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFBC Online Championship for a shot at $150,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. And welcome back to the Saturday waiver edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here. And we are going to bring back the same model from last season. If you remember these shows from last year, we've got 10 names that we're calling priority ads. These are both the guys that you'll want to add everywhere, including deep league. So this will often be, recent call-ups and that sort of thing later in the year. And it'll be guys who are already on your deep league rosters, but need to be on your shallow league rosters as well. We shoot for under 50% rostership at Yahoo for those. And then we'll move on to our deep league ads. We got 10 of those as well. We'll use a couple different filters for that. Sometimes we'll do under 50% in TGFBI to take a look at a 15-team mixed league. Sometimes we'll go under 10% at Yahoo as well. Some deeper names there. For these first names, we'll try to give you bid recommendations. For the later ones, we realized that the bid kept being, one or two. So for the deep league guys, assume close to the minimum. But for these first guys, Ryan, who is your first name and how much are you willing to bid on him?
Tyler Soderstrom, going to be my first guy. Opening day, quite an opening day for Mr. Soderstrom. 2 home runs. One of them went 432 feet. The other one he hit 111.4 miles per hour. So a couple of bombs. Back in the lineup Friday, had 2 more hits, an RBI double. There's plenty to be excited about coming into the season with Tyler Soderstrom as well. Last season he had 49.6% hard hit rate, 14.6% barrel rate. Moving away from Oakland Coliseum, we still don't know exactly how Sutter Park is going to play. It was one of the, I think actually the most pitcher-friendly park in the PCL last year, but still should be more favorable than Oakland Coliseum. Soderstrom batted 6th on Thursday, was moved up to 5th Friday. I think there's potential for him to move up even more if he gets off to a great start. Interested to see if he ultimately is able to get catcher eligibility. He lost that coming into the year. He did catch a decent amount this spring, though. He is technically the 3rd catcher on the A's roster. Don't know how much Johnny Pareda, who's number 2 on the depth chart, is going to ultimately play. And it would depend, obviously, on your league thresholds, how many games at catcher it's going to take for Soderstrom to pick up the eligibility. But obviously that would be huge if he's able to pick that up. I think he's worth rostering purely as a first baseman as well, though. Former top prospect, still just 23 years old. I think Tyler Soderstrom is for real and should be rostered basically universally.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Tyler Soderstrom as well. What kind of bid would you be placing on him in this 12-team league, say?
Let's see. Soderstrom, I think he probably needs to be a double-digit bid. What do you think? 12 or so, something like that?
Yeah, early in the season when values are more inflated, I think you might have to go there. It's a little bit tricky because if you're in a shallower league where he wasn't picked, then presumably people didn't want him a week ago. So maybe you don't need to go that high, but I think people should want him. So maybe 6 to 8 gets you there, but maybe you got to go a little bit higher.
If you have like a fill-in second catcher maybe, and you're crossing your fingers on that catcher eligibility. Maybe you have like Drake Baldwin filling in your second catcher spot, and maybe you can throw a few extra bucks at Tyler Soderstrom in the hopes that he gets that catcher eligibility.
That's a good point as well. And also note whether or not your league gives you eligibility after 5 games in season or 10. If it's 5, then he'll get it pretty soon and maybe throw an extra buck there. My next guy is kind of similar to Soderstrom in a lot of ways, although I don't think he's going to pick up catcher eligibility. That would be a bit of a surprise. Spencer Torkelson. I did not expect to be recommending Spencer Torkelson at this point of this season. I thought Spencer Torkelson has played his way out of the league, if anything. The first overall pick in the 2020 draft, but it's just gotten worse and worse. He did show something for part of the 2023 season, but even that year, it didn't add up to anything great. It was just a 108 WRC plus. He had some good hard hit metrics, 31 homers too, but his overall performance wasn't great. And then last year, it really fell apart all the way down to a 92 WRC plus. Barrel rate collapsed, only had 10 homers, spent a lot of the year in the minors, just 92 big league games. But Torkelson, they talked about him as if he was just going to get part-time work over the offseason, a little bit of first base, a little bit of DH, even some right field. Instead, he was the cleanup hitter and designated hitter on opening day and in the lineup again in the second game as well. Went 1 for 1 with 4 walks and a homer in game 1 and went 2 for 5 with a double and a steal in game 2. So that's unusual. Maybe he's now a speed demon, Spencer Torkelson. That's just his 4th career steal. But the point is here, this is a player who was supposed to be really, really good. The first overall pick back in 2020. And it's a guy who's still just 25 years old. I should be willing to give one more chance to a guy like that in pretty much any circumstance. And even though I was completely out on Torkelson, as I assume a lot of listeners were as well, he had a good enough spring that he put himself back in the Tigers' thoughts. And again, it's the fact that he's cleaning up, too. To me, that says the Tigers think that he's actually going to be important this year. They've done a 180 on their thinking, going from assuming he's a part-timer at best to saying, actually, he's a key figure in our lineup. So I think I'll believe the Tigers here. I won't bid quite as much on him as I would on Soderstrom, but maybe 5 to 6, that kind of range on Spencer Torkelson. If you're going to get a cleanup hitter on a team that made the playoffs last year, there could be quite a lot of power numbers here.
Yeah, I think that's about right. As you mentioned, really good spring, and they weren't counting on him to be a big part. It didn't seem, but I'll harp again on the fact that the Tigers lineup, especially with all the injuries they're dealing with, just looks really, really bad. So they need Spencer Torkelson to rediscover some sort of that pop he had in 2023. So I think he's actually got a decent amount of leash for a while. I'm with you. Would not bid as high as I bid on Soderstrom, but I think he's worth a pickup if you're looking for some pop. Going to go to the other end of the spectrum, and we're going to go for speed with Victor Scott, who is the Cardinals' everyday center fielder. And speaking of leash, he's going to have it because Oliver Marmol came out and said, this is not going to be in a 2-week audition, a month-long audition. Seems like he's going to get the same treatment that they plan to give Jordan Walker this year. They're going to give him plenty of runway. Not going to send him back to AAA if he has a bad month. And Victor Scott looked awesome this spring to win that job. 1172 OPS, 4 home runs, 5 stolen bases in spring training. Really think he was rushed last season. I'm thinking that's a large reason why he struggled so badly. I think now that he's kind of got his feet under him, he'll have a better opportunity to stick. Obviously, elite stolen base potential. We're talking about a guy 2 years ago who had 94 stolen bases in the minors, and he's not a total slouch as far as his bat goes. Wouldn't be counting on the power uptick from spring training to carry over, especially with Busch Stadium as his home park. But I do think he could steal a ton of bases. He did switch his stance up a little bit late last year, and that helped a little bit. Being more quote-unquote athletic in the box helped him to kind of unlock a little bit more pop. So hopefully he can chip in at least with some doubles and triples. but you're betting on the speed here, and that's what you're going to be hoping for him to be a difference maker in your fantasy leagues. I think if you're in need of stolen bases, it's probably going to require at least as much as you bid on for Soderstrom, maybe even more. You're probably going to go up to a 15 to 20 range, I would guess, for Victor Scott.
Yeah, just because the hype is absolutely there. And maybe that means he's a bad pick for that reason, because you're going to have to spend an extra 5% for that hype. But I've already picked him up in one league last weekend when that was available. I think that he's going to give you a chance to steal 50, 60 bases. It sounds like they're going to give him plenty of run. You mentioned it's not just going to be a 2-week audition. Last year, he got 50 games, I think, and he was terrible. So that wasn't just a tiny sample. So there's certainly a downside here of, okay, he improves from terrible. And what is he now? Really bad? That's still not good enough. But he did have that power uptick in this spring. You know, his hard hit numbers aren't terrible. This is not quite a Chandler Simpson profile where both of them get around 100 steals in the minors. But whereas Simpson is a 0 homer, single-digit strikeout rate guy, Scott in the minors had a good strikeout rate, but not a single-digit one. And he didn't have power, but he didn't have 0 power either. So a less extreme version, and somebody who's there now. I think you got to get him if you need those steals. My next guy here, I was deciding between a whole bunch of outfielders whose rostership was far too low in Yahoo leagues, but who are pretty universal in deeper leagues. I looked at Wilyer Abreu. I think he deserves more rostership. We kind of forgot about him in Boston, but he opened the year with a reminder of how good he is. I thought about Lars Nootbaar, was surprised about how available he was in the shallower leagues. He's leading off for the Cardinals. But the guy I'm going with actually today is Brandon Marsh. The reason why I'm going with Brandon Marsh is I think he's an everyday player this year, at least on opening day. He started against the left-handed Mackenzie Gore. Now, I should note that Max Kepler did as well, and one of those two guys is going to sit for Johan Rojas, I would imagine, against most lefties. So if Marsh sits against the next lefty or two, then okay, fine, I rescind this recommendation. But Brandon Marsh is pretty good power, speed, late draft sleeper type option. It's just that he's been locked into that platoon role the last couple of years, so he wasn't able to get you huge season-ending numbers in power or speed. Last year, though, it was 16 homers and 19 steals. That's good for a deep league, not quite enough for a shallow league, but that was in 476 plate appearances. Get him to 600 plate appearances this year, and we're talking, you know, a 20-25 season. The batting average probably will go down given the at-bats against lefties, but I still think he can give you a 240-ish. So it's somebody who can hit you homers, who can run, and who's not going to give you a 0 in the batting average, and who's going to play quite a lot. A pretty good glove, good enough to start in center or be a good left fielder when Rojas is in the game. I don't think Brandon Marsh is all that different from, say, Garrett Mitchell, somebody who's gotten quite a lot of sleeper buzz. Marsh is maybe just a little bit older, but the profile's pretty the same. Too many strikeouts, but hits the ball hard enough and can run that it all pretty much works. So if Brandon Marsh truly is an everyday player this year, I think he's an all formats type of guy. Do you agree?
I would agree. Did notice today he's batting 9th again against a righty, so that's not ideal.
True.
But, you know, even with that, I mean, if he's going to be playing every day, he's going to be providing enough in the power and the speed department to be basically universally rostered. Also noticed that
I was just going to throw out my bid. Probably doesn't need to be that high, right?
Yeah.
He's just not getting that much hype. So I think you can get him for 2 to 4, but he's going to be pretty useful.
Yeah, I would agree. Moving on to Kyle Manzardo, my next recommendation. Unfortunately, only util eligible right now, but I think he needs to be rostered everywhere regardless. Batted 5th versus a lefty on opening day. Hit a home run, 3 extra base hits, 4 RBIs. He's batting 3rd against a right-hander today. Not a great start Kyle Manzardo got off to last year, but seemed to find his stride late in the year. Had an 873 OPS with 5 home runs in September, then carried that over with an 842 OPS, another home run in the postseason. Had a great spring training, 999 OPS, 4 home runs. And Progressive Field was kind of sneakily great for left-handed bats last year. Part of the reason for, I think, Josh Naylor's power breakout last year was because of that. They opened up an area of the right field concourse, and I think that contributed to how balls flew to right field. And that obviously the concourse thing has not changed this year. So I suspect that it's going to be a really good place for lefties to hit again. And Kyle Manzardo looks like he's going to be an everyday player. Encouraging that he's batting all the way up in the 5 spot against the lefty, even higher against a righty. Legitimate former top prospect, still really young. Hopefully he's going to pick up that first eligibility sooner rather than later, so you don't have to stick him just in the utility spot. And I do think that'll happen. He'll get some reps at first base on days that Carlos Santana either sits or moves into the DH spot. So hopefully before the end of April, he'll have first base eligibility. But even now with just util only, I think Kyle Manzardo needs to be universally rostered.
Yeah, I would agree. Probably not going to take a big bid to get him in leagues where he wasn't drafted, but I think you should try to get him for a few bucks and add him to your roster, especially once he gets that eligibility. I think he'll be a lot more useful. I think he probably would have been drafted in a lot more leagues.
Well, you think maybe in between Soderstrom and Torkelson or higher than Soderstrom? Who would you prefer out of those three?
I guess we could go Soderstrom, then Marsh, then Torque, but it's not that different. I think definitely Soderstrom at the top for me, but in leagues where all three are available, that might lower the bid on all of them, because if all three are available, it's unlikely that 3 people are going to be pushing super hard on first baseman. So maybe if you're in that situation, that's a sign that you can lower the bids, but I certainly would want one of them. I think they're all have a pretty good chance of being pretty useful this year. Let's move to the mound, where my first guy here is Jack Leiter, who earned his first career win Friday against the Red Sox, allowed 1 run on 5 hits and a walk, struck out only 4 batters in 5 innings. The performance was fine. The main reason we're in on Jack Leiter is he's in the rotation to start the year. That did not necessarily seem like that was going to be the case for most of draft season, but then the Rangers suffered injuries to Cody Bradford and John Gray. So both Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker are in the rotation to start the year. And if they pitch well, they should presumably stay in the rotation all season. Certainly can't count on Jack Leiter pitching well for his career, including yesterday's start. He still has a 7.97 ERA and a 1.65 WHIP in 10 appearances. And the strikeout stuff that he had in the minors hasn't actually translated to the majors so far. An 18% strikeout rate as a major leaguer. He was regularly up over 30% in the minors. Too many walks in the minors as well. The main appeal, though, for Leiter is he was a very highly talented prospect who continues to evolve. And even though that hasn't totally worked for him yet, somebody who's continuing to evolve and who's getting the chance now, I want him on my team. Maybe I don't want to start him all the time just yet, but I want him on at least my bench for his next few starts. And if he proves that actually he has made the changes, there's still really high potential here with Leiter, the number 2 overall pick in the 2021 draft. Really good stuff. Command questions and getting that stuff to work against major league hitters, certainly. This might not work, but Jack Leiter, I think you're going to have to put a real bid for him, at least in the maybe 8 to 10% range, because he is just such a well-known name. But I think I'd be willing to do it. How about you?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Got up to 99 miles per hour in his start yesterday. That was kind of in line with what he did during spring training as well. He's added the kick change, which is kind of this year's sweeper, kind of the in vogue pitch. Also added a 2-seamer as well. I think it's going to be about walks for him. Is he going to find the strike zone enough? Because the stuff is certainly there with Jack Leiter, and he's, as you mentioned, the pedigree and everything is also there. So it's going to take a real bid to get him, but I think he's worth the shot. Another young pitcher I like quite a bit is Sean Burke of the White Sox. He had an awesome debut start this season, 6 shutout innings, just 3 hits allowed, no walks, only 3 strikeouts, so it wasn't perfect, but overall, great start against the Angels. Really good showing late in the year in September last year, 1.42 ERA, a 22-7 strikeout to walk rate over 19 innings. The stuff with Sean Burke has always been really good. He had a 29.4% strikeout rate in the minors. What are the walks going to be? He has this kind of the same problem as Jack Leiter. He's had control problems throughout the minors. also has had health issues as well. I don't know that he's ever reached. I don't know. I can't remember what his innings high in the minors is, but it's not super high. He's definitely dealt with I think shoulder issues each of the last 2 seasons, but the stuff has bounced back. Looks great. He does have things working against him in addition to the walks and the health. He's obviously pitching for the White Sox, which is not a great place to pick up wins. It's not a great park to pitch in, but I do believe in the pitcher himself, and that could be enough to make him worth rostering in deeper formats. I don't think it's going to take a super high bid to get him because of that kind of bad team context. But I think he's worth 6 to 8% range, something like that.
Yeah, I think there's some real upside here with Sean Burke. Good strikeout numbers in the minors, poor command at times, but there's real strikeout upside here, which there needs to be because there's not a lot of win upside on the White Sox. But I still think the whole picture there for Sean Burke looks like he deserves to be on somebody's roster. My next starting pitcher here is Kris Bubic, who is perhaps one of the players with maybe one of the bigger differences between the sharps and the broader pool here. I'm seeing 100% ownership for Bubic in TGFBI, but just 13% in Yahoo. And I think that Yahoo number is going to rise quickly, or at least it should. Bubic has had a very weird career. He was a terrible starter when he first debuted, a 4.89 ERA, 153 whip over his first 3 seasons. But then heading into 2023, he added a sweeper and showed promise over 3 starts, and then he had Tommy John surgery. But then he came back late last year as a reliever and was outstanding. 2.67 ERA, 102 whip, but a 32% strikeout rate against a 4% walk rate is an incredible combination. Nobody who threw at least 30 innings last year struck out batters at that rate while also walking batters that infrequently. The sweeper remained there for Bubic. He actually more than doubled its usage too, which says to me that he's a categorically different guy than when he was a bad starter before, right? Pitchers are determined by what their pitches are and their command and their durability, right? But the pitches are the main thing. If you take away a pitch or you add a pitch, you're a different pitcher. So I'm not really that concerned about Bubic's early career numbers. I think many drafters are. That's why he was not on a lot of teams, but he has won the Royals' 5th starter job. And I think he's going to not be their 5th best starter. I think he's going to be, maybe their 3rd best or even better. I think there's a lot of potential here for Kris Bubic. He's not going to repeat that 32% strikeout rate, 4% walk rate he had as a reliever. But man, what if he's at 26-6 or something? That's still elite, and that would be a meaningful step back in both areas. So Kris Bubic, I think grab him now while you can. The bid might not have to be that high in some of those shallower leagues because it seems like people aren't on him yet. If you think your league is sharp, go get him, but they're probably already on him. So maybe you only need to bid in the 3 to 5% range here, especially because I don't think he's going to make a start before this weekend's FAAB period. So go get him now before he does.
Yep, I'm on the Kris Bubic bandwagon, so I'm totally backing you there. I'm going to switch over to relief pitcher side for a guy who doesn't have a save yet, but he's looking like the best option right now in the Reds bullpens. Tony Santillan. Last week during our podcast, I kind of just in passing mentioned that I liked Tony Santillan a lot. Wish I had more conviction in that. Wish I put my money where my mouth is because I don't have any shares of him. And then Terry Francona came out and said that he's an quote unquote obvious choice, something like to that degree, and for saves in the Reds bullpen. But he also mentioned might need to use him earlier in games if the situation dictates it. And on opening day, that happened. Just bizarre usage of his bullpen on opening day with Terry Francona. Ian Jabot got the save chance and melted down promptly. Tony Santillan is the guy I think that's at least currently healthy to own in that Reds bullpen. You and I have both talked about Taylor Rogers as well, but he was bypassed for that save chance. I still think he should be rostered, but I would move Santillan to the top of that heap. Great numbers last year out of the Reds bullpen, 46-9 strikeout to walk rate over 30 innings. Gets lots of whiffs with his fastball. He's got a good slider as well. What is the situation with Alexis Diaz? I think it's pretty clear they want him to get that job back. Tito Francona has basically said as much, but basically a phantom IL stint, I think, with Alexis Diaz right now with the hamstring injury, but he was pitching late in spring training after overcoming that hamstring issue. I think this is just about him giving him time to work on his issues. We were already kind of worried, we're pretty worried about Alexis Diaz's ability to hang on to that job anyway prior to all this. I still think he's long-term right now, probably the guy to roster in that bullpen, mostly because Francona wants him to have that job back. But Tony Santillan might still be the most talented arm in that bullpen and currently probably the favorite for saves. Because he doesn't have a save yet, that might change today, might change tomorrow. Don't know that it'll take a lot. The thing about early season closer FAAB bids, if he has 0 saves on Sunday, probably not going to be much. But if he gets 2 in the next 2 days, you might need to spend 30% of your FAAB to get him. That's just the way it works with closers. So this is with the caveat that does not have a save yet. I'd probably bid 8%, something like that. But if he does pick up a save or 2 this weekend, be prepared to bid quite a bit more.
Yeah, I think that sounds right to me. Santillan, probably the top guy to grab in that Cincinnati bullpen. I guess if you are really desperate for saves, though, I would create a waterfall that also has Taylor Rogers on it, also has Scott Barlow, maybe even Emilio Pagan, maybe even Graham Ashcraft, who got a mention here from Jordan in the chat. I mean, wouldn't be surprised if he gets a chance eventually. Recently converted from starting, I think it's probably not a shock that he's not getting the first opportunities here. But Santillan, the first one, a lot of alternatives. And, maybe they're all just going to fight over every chance until Diaz comes back in a few weeks. And it's all for naught. But I like the recommendation there. I'll give you my final name here. Somebody in the chat says that Lawrence Butler was dropped in one of their leagues. I don't care how shallow that league is, but yes, go get Lawrence Butler right now. Plenty of upside, plenty of floor as well. People dropping him. If you're in a league where people are dropping him, yeah, you're going to have some interesting opportunities popping up throughout the season. My final pitcher here in our priority ads is AJ Smith-Shawver, who has won the 5th starter job with Atlanta, or has he won the 4th starter job with Atlanta? That is why I have him here as a priority ad. Now, the fantasy community has more or less anointed Grant Holmes as the Atlanta 4th starter, and I like Grant Holmes too. I like everything that we saw from him last year. No reason to doubt the hype there. But Smith-Shawver is also in this rotation, and one of those 2 guys is going to make way for Spencer Strider, maybe in just about 2-3 weeks, apparently, given how quickly he's going. And so maybe Smith-Shawver only gets to make about 2 starts, but there are 2 reasons why I think he might be ahead of Holmes. One is that he's listed as he's the 4th starter. He's starting the 4th game of the year tomorrow against the Padres, whereas Grant Holmes is starting the 5th game against the Dodgers. I mean, maybe they're saving him to face a tougher lineup in the Dodgers, but Smith-Shawver is ahead of Holmes, at least literally in chronological order. And then there was the fact that Grant Holmes pitched in relief on opening day. Now, that might have been nothing. Often teams will give a guy in the playoffs a inning in relief on what would have been his bullpen day. But pretty weird to see that on opening day. Obviously, Atlanta has other relievers they could have gone to. And again, I don't think that means that Holmes isn't a starter, but I do think it means that they're more likely to use him in a sort of swingman role, bouncing between the rotation and bullpen throughout the year. So I think there's some chance that, if Smith-Shawver pitches at least as well as Holmes does in his first 2 or 3 starts this year, that it could be Smith-Shawver all year, making 25, 30 starts this season. He's somebody who was pretty high potential prospect. He debuted, I think you could say before he was ready. He debuted at age 20, hasn't really shown that much so far. He made 6 appearances as a rookie, just 1 last year. Didn't dominate the minors either, but the potential's there, the opportunity's there as well, and there might be even more opportunity than we thought. So I would be trying to grab AJ Smith-Shawver just in case. I don't know if the bid should be huge because the floor here is he makes 2 starts and loses his job, but the ceiling's really high. So I think I might go 5, 6, 7% to get AJ Smith-Shawver where he's still out there. You buy it?
Yeah, I think he's worth that level of bid, and good points about the usage of Holmes that caught my eye too. Looking at that box score, and of course, Holmes has plenty of relief experience as well, so that he could easily slide back into a bullpen role if that's the direction the Braves want to go. But plenty of upside with AJ Smith-Shawver for sure.
All right, so we move on to the deep league buys, where these are guys that you'll be wanting in your 15-team leagues and that sort of depth. You might want some of them in the shallower leagues, particularly if you're desperate for saves. We'll get to that for a minute, but you've got a starter to kick things off. Who do you got?
Yeah, I need to give you your kudos here, because you suspected, I can't remember if it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago on the podcast, kind of questioned whether Ben Brown was destined for the bullpen, or maybe he was going to win that fifth starter spot. I had kind of assumed he was going to go to the bullpen. I think a lot of people did, but lo and behold, he was named the fifth starter, and he's super interesting as well. 3.11 FIP last year. ERA was a little bit higher, but 64-19 strikeout to walk rate over 55 and a third innings. He has one really, really, really good pitch with his knuckle curveball. 51% whiff rate with that knuckle curve last year, and his four-seamer actually graded out better per run value on Baseball Savant. Really only a two-pitch pitcher right now. He's working on a changeup. He threw one of them in Tokyo, and it came in at 92.5 miles per hour. So he's got kind of that Edward Cabrera really hard changeup. Hopefully that's the only comparison to Edward Cabrera Ben Brown has. But if he can get that third pitch to work, that could be huge for him. I think he's got a chance to run with that fifth spot in the rotation. Javier Assad probably back before the end of this month, but I don't know that he's higher than Ben Brown in the pecking order. Ben Brown's also very analytically inclined. I read about him being that way, and that automatically makes me steer towards him as well. Like guys that use those numbers to try to make themselves better. And Ben Brown not going to be on many radars. That's why he's in our kind of secondary section here. But run and pick him up, because I think he's got some real upside.
Yeah, Ben Brown not even on the radar at the Cubs official shop. I tried to pick up his jersey this week to be the only guy wearing a Ben Brown jersey at Wrigley, and I was 0 for 4 in Wrigleyville. 4 different stores were not stocking Ben Brown. They just don't know. They're going to be stocking Ben Brown by the end of the year, I think. I am very much a Ben Brown fan. All the other contestants for the Cubs' fifth starter job are fifth starters, maybe even sixth starters. Colin Ray, Jordan Wicks, Javier Assad. I mean, like you said, maybe Assad gets the job back when he's healthy, but Ben Brown could actually be something. He's got real strikeout upside, and that might lead to him moving to the pen, especially if that third pitch never really comes around. You know, that high leverage multi-inning role that he pitched in the Tokyo series might be what suits him best. But given that he's got the job now and there's a chance at a starting role all year, I mean, Ben Brown, slightly too many walks last year, but great strikeout numbers. His strikeout and walk numbers look a whole lot like Dylan Cease and Cole Reagan's last year. Now, I'm not projecting, the innings total that those guys can give you. I'm not projecting year-end fantasy value like that, but that's the type of pitcher that Ben Brown is. So high upside, low floor, but we got to be chasing upside at this time of year if you can at all afford to do so. The rest of our deep league pitchers are all going to be relievers here. I'll mention Luke Jackson again. We talked about him in the intro, but I think that he's the top reliever ad for me. I know you threw Tony Santillan in the priority section, so maybe you'd go Santillan first, but Luke Jackson, I don't think he's that good, to be clear, and I wouldn't trust him to keep the job, but if you need saves, you got to pick up the guy who's giving you saves now. Now, by throwing him in this section, I'm probably not going to bid enough to get him, and that means somebody else is going to throw 15% of their budget at him and get 5 saves, and then he'll lose the job in late April or something like that. But I think we got to trust the manager saying that he wants Luke Jackson to be the guy. We got to trust the fact that he gave him the save opportunity right after he had just screwed up the night before. It's just the guy has a 4.52 ERA and a 1.39 WHIP over the last 3 seasons, and that's pretty much the same as his numbers for his whole career. So I can't give Jackson anything more than an endorsement in this segment of the show, but he's got to be the top option if what you want is saves this week. So if that's how you like to manage saves, go get Luke Jackson this week, maybe next week. Hope he's still there in 3 weeks, and then tune back in because we'll have some more reliever recommendations at that point.
Yep, another reliever recommendation here, and we also mentioned him a little bit earlier. Jose Alvarado, just absurdly dominant spring training. He had 9 scoreless innings, 20-3 strikeout to walk rate. He's pumping 102 mile an hour sinkers. Opening day, Jordan Romano gave the lead in the 8th. Alvarado came in, got a scoreless 9th, picked up the win, had a couple strikeouts. As you mentioned earlier, it's lots of inconsistency with Jose Alvarado, as a Phillies fan, but I mean, when he's on, he's one of the best relievers in baseball. You remember a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was, he actually spent some time back in the minors, and then he came back and reeled off like 30 scoreless innings in a row or something like that. Just when he's motivated, when he's on, he's absurdly good. I'm still leaning towards Jordan Romano at the top of the heap in that Phillies bullpen, but gosh, Alvarado should be, the way he's pitching right now, should be owned basically in most formats, I think. Even if a couple of years ago, I think he finished with like 10 saves, but his numbers were so good otherwise that he was very valuable in fantasy. I think that could be the type of year that he has. So if he's still available, go out and pick him up.
Yeah, I don't think I'd project Alvarado to lead the Phillies in saves in the month of August, but I would project him to lead the Phillies in saves in April. I think at this point, the fact that Romano was used in the 8th, Alvarado was getting ready for the save in the 9th. Turned out he pitched the 9th and got the win when the Phillies won in the 10th inning. I think that we had thought that if Romano was healthy, then maybe he could be the one to convince the Phillies to move away from a committee. And even though he was healthy this spring, opening day, they didn't do that. So I think we have to assume it's a committee again for the Phillies. And the way they like to do it is having about 4 guys who could pitch in the 9th inning, and whoever's the hottest gets the bulk of the saves. And right now, Alvarado's the hottest, a 59% strikeout rate in spring. He's just on one of his stupid stretches. So go get him for this month and maybe next month. Again, saves are a temporary game. Don't have proof that Alvarado's going to get the next one, but I'd be feeling pretty good about it. Another reliever that I would be looking at grabbing here is Justin Slayton of the Red Sox. And now Justin Slayton is not the Red Sox closer, but Justin Slayton has 100% of the Red Sox saves so far this year, all one of them. Aroldis Chapman was named the closer, but manager Alex Cora said, yes, he's the closer, but we might use him in the 8th inning sometimes, for example, when Corey Seager is up. And guess what happened in the first game of the year? Corey Seager led off the 8th inning, so Aroldis Chapman entered in the 8th, and it was Justin Slayton who got the 9th. And I think that means that's reason enough to pick up Slayton, even though he's maybe the Griffin Jacks to Joan Duran situation here. He's probably the second guy, but it's not Liam Hendricks, who's opening the year on the IL with elbow issues, and it's not Garrett Whitlock either, who I believe pitched multiple innings earlier in the game. Slayton is the guy who's going to get the chances that Chapman doesn't, and do you really trust Aroldis Chapman to remain in the 9th inning for 6 months? What about 3 or 4? I think Chapman will probably pitch his way out of the job at some point. So if I'm in a position where I don't need an immediate closer, probably because I've failed to pick up Jackson and Alvarado, I think Justin Slayton is probably worth it. I think he would be the guy I project to lead the Red Sox in saves after the All-Star break, and I think he'll get you at least a handful now. So Justin Slayton, another reliever to grab. You got one more for us?
Yeah, another guy who I think I would project him to lead his team in saves right now, although his performance last night was not super encouraging. Bo Brisky of the Tigers. Jason Foley surprisingly optioned prior to opening day. Brisky had just 1 save last year, but he got 2 more in the postseason. If you look back over his final 37 2/3 innings between the regular and postseason last year, had a sub-2 ERA. On Thursday and opening day, faced 3-4-5 in the bottom of the 8th, down 1 run. Had one 1 strikeout in a 1-2-3 frame. As I mentioned, things didn't go nearly as well yesterday. Picked up a bullpen save in the 10th inning for the Tigers, but could look at that another way. He actually got the save opportunity, which is encouraging. Brisky does not have any splits issues. Changeup might be his best pitch, so he's effective both against righties and lefties. We got a lot to sort out still in the Tigers bullpen. I don't admittedly have a great read on this situation. I'm not sure AJ Hinch knows what he's going to do either yet, but I do think Bo Brisky is probably the most talented reliever they have. Actually, I think Tyler Holton probably is, and he needs to be rostered as well. But I know they like to use Holton in so many different roles. He opens games, he closes games, he pitches in the middle of games. So if you're looking for purely saves, it might only be 15 saves ultimately that leads the Tigers this season. I don't know. But I would probably put Bo Brisky at the top of that list.
Yeah, fair enough. We had some Tyler Holton comments in the chat that I can't quite find at the moment. But I think that Holton is worth rostering. I'm with you on that. I drafted him in the reserve rounds a lot of places, hoping it might be him. But really, I was just thinking of him as somebody who was usable in the opening weeks before I figured out who all the starters were that I wanted or who the actual closers were. Holton is somebody who gives you good innings, but he's not a high strikeout guy. He's also a lefty. And as you mentioned, he's somebody they like using in multiple inning roles. Eyeballing it, he's averaged about 4 outs per appearance the last 2 years. And that's not usually what you want out of a closer. So a useful pitcher, maybe not a closer though. Other deep league pitchers, you could go for the Dennis Santana, Colin Halterman, who we mentioned earlier when discussing David Bednar. And again, there's going to be 2 more days worth of saves between now and the FAAB period. So there's going to be a couple more for you with the Sunday night waivers here. Should we move to the deep league hitters since we're over an hour here? My first hitter for you is Miguel Vargas, who is seemingly the everyday leadoff man for the Chicago White Sox, and that has value, even though it's the Chicago White Sox and even though it's Miguel Vargas. To this point in his career, he's a 177, 275, 316 hitter with 13 homers in basically a full season, 595 plate appearances. So it's really been quite ugly for Miguel Vargas, and it may continue to be ugly. Maybe there's just nothing here, but that was all in very sporadic playing time with the Dodgers, and they were trying to figure out what position they could actually work him in at. If he's just given a true everyday leadoff role, trusted as just one of our key pieces on the White Sox, I'm willing to give him a month or so to see whether or not it works. Remember, he was supposed to be a pretty good hitter. He was somebody who was kind of positionless, and it was unclear if the whole profile was really going to work as an above average regular on a good team. So it's no surprise to see Vargas no longer on the Dodgers, but he's supposed to have a good hit tool and non-zero power as well. So I want to give him a chance, give him regular at bats for 2-3 weeks. And if he's hitting, league average or better, then I think he's going to be useful enough, mostly a compiler, but an everyday leadoff man on whatever team they are on has some value. So keep an eye on Miguel Vargas. Hold your nose if you have to, but I do think he is worth a pickup in a lot of places. Who's your next deep league hitter?
Ryan Bliss won the Mariners' second base job. He had a couple walks and a stolen base in the opener. He did not start Friday's game. They went with Dylan Moore at second base, but I know the Mariners want to keep Moore in a super utility role. I do think this was more about, getting everybody reps early on in the season. Ryan Bliss is at the top of that second base depth chart for Seattle. 12 home runs and 50 stolen bases at AAA last year. Added another 5 stolen bases in the majors in limited action. Look back to 2023, he had 23 home runs and 55 stolen bases in the minors. So this is a guy who's put up good numbers in the minors for sure. Although he's a non-zero power guy, I wouldn't be counting on that from him. Yeah, he hit a couple home runs from the Mariners last year, but I think the power is fairly limited, and he's going to be held back by his home park. But he's not a total zero in the power department, but it's going to be the stolen bases that you're going to be looking for from Ryan Bliss, and I think he could definitely provide that. Decent on-base skills as well, so hopefully he can get a decent OBP and take advantage of those wheels.
Yeah, a useful player, unless you're already way too set on speed, but certainly there will be plenty of teams out there who should be bidding on Ryan Bliss. My next guy up here is Will Wagner of the Blue Jays, and I'm really trying to look for who is perhaps unexpectedly playing every day for these deep league ads here. If you just need some playing time in the deeper leagues, Will Wagner seems to have it. He has started both games so far. He batted 7th and started at third base on opening day. And today he is batting 6th as the DH. Actually, that's 3 games. He batted 7th in the first 2 games, and now he's batting 6th today. So all 3 starts for Will Wagner. Granted, all 3 against righties, so maybe he's just a strong side platoon guy. But if he's playing against every righty, that's something here for Will Wagner. And there might be a little bit more to his profile than you had thought. He is somebody who was an older rookie last year, hit pretty well in just 24 games, a 788 OPS. The main thing in his profile in the minors was really good strikeout and walk numbers. Last year, a 16.6% walk rate with a 10% strikeout rate is pretty ridiculous. The year before, 12% walk rate, 17% strikeout rate. So only once has he done that way more walks than strikeouts thing, but good plate discipline throughout his time in the minors. Not a lot of power or speed, unfortunately, which means that his only real fantasy value is that he's going to play a lot, and it looks like he might. The projections sort of disagree on how useful he'll be. I see Steamer gives him a 120 WRC plus, Zips at 117. I think those might be ones that penalize you less for being old for the level. I remember Zips was big into Michael Busch last year, and none of the other projection systems really bought it, and it actually ended up being correct. So there could be something similar here with Wagner, who has just been a productive hitter. I mean, look at his minor league numbers. He's productive at every stop, just not flashy. That's the kind of player where if he actually gets more playing time than you think as a 27-year-old or 26-year-old still rookie who's not flashy anywhere, might just actually be a pretty big help in deep leagues, rounding out your roster, assuming he continues to play as often as he has. So Will Wagner, with this much playing time, I mean, sure, give him a look. Who's your next guy here?
Gavin Lux, first of back-to-back Gavins. Go ahead and put your guesses in the comments for who the next Gavin is going to be. Mine is Gavin Lux, though. Batted cleanup for the Reds opening day. Reached base a couple times. He's batting cleanup again today. Probably going to move to third base versus righties when Austin Hayes returns. It doesn't seem like the Hayes's calf injury is going to keep him out too long. Gavin Lux kind of started to figure things out in the second half with the Dodgers last year, had an 899 OPS and 7 home runs. Decided to swing harder after working with, I think his uncle is like a college baseball coach, and swinging harder meant more strikeouts, but also more damage, and we'll take that trade-off. Look at spring training, put up great numbers as well, 965 OPS, a couple home runs, 3 stolen bases, and he gets to call Great American Ballpark home. So what if Gavin Lux, former top prospect, has indeed started to figure out his swing, he's going to benefit greatly from Great American Ballpark, and he's currently occupying a prime spot in the Reds lineup. So I think he is worth a pickup.
Yeah, I would agree. I would maybe even put him in the shallow league section. I think Gavin Lux is a priority. I think there's so many things pushing in the right direction. Park, lineup spot, playing time, and the improvement in his profile as well. Really love Gavin Lux this season. And Gavin number 2, Sheets. That's my guy. I'm going to end this section with Gavin Sheets. Somebody I've been interested in as a deep league sleeper because he has won a job for the Padres. It looks like he's going to be on the large side of a platoon as the designated hitter. Would expect Yuli Gurriel to get the starts against lefties like he did on opening day. And now Gavin Sheets has not been all that good as a major leaguer. Fair. That's a good counterpoint I hear you making, listener. But Gavin Sheets, he spent his entire career as a White Sox, and I want to give guys a chance to show me what they look like when they escape that awful, depressing situation there. Gavin Lux, for his White Sox career, 680 OPS. It was not good enough. He struck out actually at a slightly better than league average rate, but the barrel rate of just 6.3% was not as high as you'd expect for somebody who's a first base / corner outfielder. I think there should be more power there, though. There was supposed to be quite a lot of raw power. Only a future game power, looking back at his pre-debut prospect scouting report back at Fangraphs, was only 50 future game power, but 70 raw. This is a big, strong man who just hasn't had it work yet in the majors. He's now 29. Odds are that it's not going to work in the end, that, you know, the reason why he was a below average hitter with the White Sox wasn't the White Sox fault. It was Gavin Sheets' fault. But the opportunity's there with a much better organization, strong side platoon role. Give him 2-3 weeks. If he shows anything, I think he is going to be a useful deep league roster filler guy. And if in 2 or 3 weeks he's showing nothing, a very easy cut for Gavin Sheets. So I like him as a minimum sort of bid here at the end. I just want to throw out 2 more names too, just because some of our deep league guys here are a little bit more highly owned in some of those 15-team mixed leagues. If you're really searching the dregs for playing time, I noticed Jonah Bride is batting 3rd and playing every day for the Marlins, so you got some at-bats there. Also, Max Muncy of the Athletics seems to be playing every day. So that's the main thing I'd be doing for trying to find names beyond the ones we mentioned here. Just look for guys who have started every single game so far. That presumably means they're in their team's plans. But that's going to do it for us, right, Ryan? Do we mention every single name anybody might theoretically want to pick up? Or do you want to give more thoughts on Cameron Meisner, who keeps getting mentioned here in the chat?
Yeah, Uncle Ted, a big Cameron Meisner fan. And as a Mizzou guy, who Cameron Meisner is as well, I can throw his name out there, but I'm not super encouraged, super bullish about how he's gonna fare with the Rays if he gets those regular reps. But a lot of swing and miss in his game. However, he does have some power, does have some speed. So if you're looking for a deep league ad, he maybe throw a buck his way just to make Uncle Ted happy.
Yeah, I count myself out on him for now. It's really high strikeout rates as an overage minor leaguer, right around 30% last year. And he was, 26, 27 in the minors. To me, that's a dark red flag. But, you know, there are some other things going on there. So I don't mind throwing a flyer at Cameron Meisner now that Josh Lowe's down. Vinny Capra also got some mentions in the chat, but I think he might just be on the short side of a platoon unless I've missed something in the lineup today. Now, well, they've only played lefties, so we don't yet know. Right. Got to wait until we see who's starting against righties for the Brewers, although I do like that you could draft Vinny Capra and nickname him the GOAT. But anyway, that's going to do it for today's show. We will have another set of pickups here next week here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Ryan. We'll be back here next week.